For thank you everybody for joining. We seem to have a bit of a crowd online and a bit of a crowd in New York. So good morning, good afternoon, good evening, depending on um, where you are. My name is Millie Antidote. We're part of the Global Innovation Team, and Innovation Conversations is one way in which our team scans the world outside UNDP for some interesting, disruptive, different ways of doing development in the hope of learning, borrowing, and stealing from their ideas and their work, collaborating and partnering with them in order to provide better services ourselves to our government and other partners. So today, we have Caroline Dama from Grassroots Economics. We got interested in grassroots economics about a couple of years ago when we were looking at different ways in which communities leverage technology to increase their resilience to various different crises they face that impact economic stability and national currencies. We started seeing, especially after the 2008 crash, there's been a mushrooming of different community and alternative currencies. We all use alternative currencies a lot of times without even knowing. Think about frequent flyer miles, for example. But in our case, what interests us is the use of alternative. There are different names, right? Alternative complementary currencies. These are currencies that don't replace the national currency, but obviously complement. Um, we were interested to see how the use of these alternative currencies might lead to financial inclusion, to economic stimulus for especially marginalized groups in population, in different populations. We came across a really good example and this is true. After the 2008, we saw mushrooming of these both in the developed world. So a really good case to look up is Sardex in Sardinia, as well as a developing context where citizens use complementary currencies to trade goods and services among each other in absence of cash or in addition to cash. Um, but now with the added caveat that what technology does introduces a layer of establishing trust and credit worthiness, so to speak. So technology gives us a possibility to record when somebody's trading or purchasing something, so they can signal their trustworthiness. So in case of grassroots economics, in working with community currencies, their work really starts from a premise that informal economy, that the trading of goods and services that happens completely outside a formal system, it's not a bug, but it's a feature of a system. It's a way in which it signals a way in which communities and individuals cope with various types of crises that might be hitting them. So grassroots economics has really gotten into a space and is probably one of the most sophisticated organizations that has the most in-depth knowledge about behavior of people living in poverty, how they cope, and how they use complementary currencies. And they have been able to show that introducing these currencies tends to increase saving rates in families. It leads to lower dropout of kids from school because parents tend to be by using complementary currencies, they tend to save their cash to pay for school, and a host of other insights that we would like to learn more about. So, Caroline, without any further ado, I hand it over to you. For everybody out there, if you have questions, please post them in the chat. We will most likely get to them at the end of Caroline's presentation, where we can have a chance to engage and have a conversation with her about her experience. Caroline, over to you.
Thank you. Yes, good afternoon and good morning and good evening from wherever you are. I really appreciate the opportunity to be able to share with you what we've been doing at Grassroots Economics. And I always like to say that for us, we went into these communities, looking for a way to help them out. But I think sometimes when you want to think of real sustainable projects, you think, is there a way that you can rally the community themselves to rise up and help themselves? And what would that sustainable project look like? So like for us, we'd go to these communities and we'd do a lot of resource mobilization and we tell them this is what we feel is going to help you. most of the time when you do these big projects, you go and you take water tanks, you go in, you want to build a school, you go in, you want to bring piped water. You never really ask the essential questions. So for us, it's almost like an up-bottom approach. Is there any time anyone goes to a community and asks them, are you having 3 square meals a day? Is your child sick at home? You know, those really essential questions. Are you meeting all your basic needs day in, day out? And because you're not asking these questions, you're not really getting the full participation of the community. Because someone once said there cannot be individual freedom in the presence of economic insecurity. And as long as people are not meeting their basic needs, they can never really participate fully. They can't be economically secure. They can't be socially secure. So the question is, how can we come up with a sustainable bottom-up approach that makes sure that it's socioeconomic and doesn't deal so much with the economic aspects? So as I go through my presentation, I'm going to take you through our story, how I went through it, and how we try to change with the times. And I'm hoping at the end of it, we can get together and ask questions and also learn from each other. And even we can point out where we think we can improve. So I think when you think about the world challenges today, my next slide, you look at some of the challenges. For instance, you have challenges like unemployment, exclusion, economic inequality, economic shocks, poverty, global warming. You'll notice that for a large extent and for a really long time, what has been going on is that the needs of a large group of the society are not being met effectively by the conventional money markets. Essentially, we are saying we are tying people to the essence of money. We are telling them as long as they don't have money, they don't have value. We are telling them that as long as they don't have a piece of paper to go exchange one good or service for another, they have no value, no intrinsic value among themselves. So the question for us was, how can we rally communities with what's already existing in the communities? So we noticed that for most of these communities, when you ask the question about financial inclusion, what are you really talking about? So like if you look at my next slide, it shows that when you're talking about financial inclusion, there are whole different aspects. So how can you bring that financial inclusion? How can you make sure that they have access, they can use it effectively, its quality, they can meet their social needs, infrastructural needs, education needs? I think there's a French play that says waiting for Godot. We can't tell communities that they have to wait for help outside. We have to find a way to rally what's already existing, the intrinsic capacities that in the community. So one way to go about it is look for an aspect one that will make sure that they can do this trades every day. Like how can they meet their basic needs every day in a way that's secure? One, we notice in those communities, even if most of the times they didn't have money, they had so many small businesses that are already going on. So like would go in the evening and the women would have small trays. And what they would do, they would have those small trays and they would want to sell their wares to people. But what happens, everyone is not buying, not because they don't have a need for that good or service, it's because they don't have money. So essentially they're being told, as long as they don't have money, nothing should move. So we start with the community, we ask them, we have everything we need right here in the community. All we need is a means of exchanging these goods and services among ourselves, especially when we don't have money. So essentially, let's not look at the solution of money to stop us really meeting our basic needs. So when you go to my next slide, you'll see that the question was, one, how can we make sure that these individuals will be able to make daily payments reliably? It will also help them access credit, which can be invested in their small income generating activities. Also, it will help them save cash so that they can make future investments in a responsible way, and also in a way that they meet their needs, and it has to be in a sustainable way. In African culture, even before money came along, we would do a barter trade system. So the question was, can we introduce such a system? So for us, we started as a promissory note. Essentially, the community is saying, as long as you're in this community and you do not have money, you never have to go angry. We are promising you that as long as you have a good or a service to offer, you can come, you can get something from us, as long as you promise that when somebody within the community also has a need, you'll also fulfill it. So it went round and we're able to do promissory notes, and people are circulating their trade when they didn't have money. So for us, it was in the form of a voucher system. Essentially, when you think about money, it's a record of exchange. These people don't have money, but they have to find a way to record the exchanges. It's easy when it's 5 people. You just say, okay, I've given you this, and tomorrow you remember. But our initial project when we started was in Bangla, and we had 200 businesses. I know it was really good because we went with the idea, and everyone is like, I'm going into debt every day just to meet my basic needs. Today, I'm running away from my neighbor because I've gotten into so much debt. And when we were looking at the debt, it wasn't a lot of money. It was mostly for $0.50 a day just to get water, or maybe to buy bread, or to go and take a motorcycle ride and go to the market. It was for really small amounts. And all we need was to introduce that voucher system in the community in the form of a promissory note, and there was magic. So we started with 20 people, and within like a month, it was already 200 people, and hence they need to have a record of exchange. And it started to circulate, and people were able to meet their needs even though they didn't have money. If you look at the next slide, you can see that the example of the voucher system that we started. So essentially, what we are saying is that they started as promissory notes, but then we call them community inclusion currencies right now. And the whole aim of it was to strengthen the national economy by providing a medium of exchange that can be used in the absence of sufficient national currency. So it's meant to be countercyclical. Why? It's not the legal tender. Essentially, you are saying they're having a fail-safe. When they don't have a lot of money, we are doing it in rural and peri-urban communities. In rural communities, when they have harvests, they have so much money. And then they have times of the month when they don't have any money. So they have a fail-safe, they can go back to the community currency. They can make their trades, their goods and services, hence the term countercyclical. So you have a lot of money, you don't need to use the community currency. When you don't have a lot of money, you shouldn't have to go hungry. The community is saying, we'll back you up with our goods and services. All you have to do, knock on the door, you have that community currency, and you'll be able to access what you need. What's important to note is that also the national currency, most people in the world, when you hold a dollar or you hold the Kenya shilling, you want to amass it, and you want to put it under your mattress and say, I'm the richest man in the village. But the community currency is about community. We are saying no one person should have all the wealth should be shared. And so this one, when you hold so much of the community currency, essentially you're saying you're very generous. You're just giving so much of your goods away. So in that way, it just keeps circulating. It doesn't pull in one place. And the more it circulates, the more goods and services keep flowing. And the beauty of it is that once you access the national currency, you can use it for saving, you can use it to grow your business. So that's how we started. When we started, we looked for a way that it was participatory. So the voucher systems were different for each communities. We had 7 communities, and the community decided how they wanted their vouchers to look like. So in the next slide, you'll see that that's one community. That's Kangemi Pesa. So the different communities drew on the vouchers what they wanted. So for Kangemi, they were just thinking about togetherness. This is something that has come to bring us together. Before, I wouldn't talk to my neighbor because I owed him so much money, or because he had money that he wasn't giving to me, or before I couldn't take part in community activities because every time I go to my chama is what we call merry-go-rounds. Women go and then they save, they look for mechanisms to be able to survive hard times. So one way of doing it, they go to the chamas and then they put resources together. They give 20 shillings if there are 20 of them. Then they give one person this week. So the person gets 400 shillings. Next week, you give another person. So hence the name merry-go-round. But then you find that sometimes even that 20 shillings, people can't access it. And then they can't take part in these social activities. And it's good because we did the research, and one of the impacts of introducing the community inclusion currency was that social aspect. The fact that a woman could be able not to go to her chama group and be able to give that 20 shillings every single week, participate in the women group activities, it was really powerful for her. And so for this community, that idea that it had brought them together, they decided that's what they would do on their community currency. So the more these communities, one such community was called Miani FDP. What happened, we had an environmental project. And so most of the farmers would come together, pool their resources, and then save for a community-owned initiative. But they are not generating enough savings. With the introduction of the community currency within 6 months, they were able to have so much savings that they were able to decide on projects. Another impact that I saw in Miani was in terms of participation. Before you would go and you tell them, okay, I think we'll bring you piped water, they're like, okay. But then there's a beauty in people meeting their basic needs. It takes away the worry of, even if I go to that meeting, how can I contribute to it? And I'm not sure what I'll feed my child when it comes at lunchtime. But then now you're knowing that I have saved enough money. My needs are being met by the community inclusion currency. When I go for the meeting, I can be able to say, I don't think we really need piped water right now. Maybe we need something else. Or we can say, yes, bring us the piped water, but can you also add a tank that can be a reservoir? So to be able to see that increase of participation was really important for us. Also in terms of leadership. So we had 280 farmers. And out of the 280 farmers, we had 19 males. But because, especially in rural areas in Kenya, most women are more concerned of food and what the children eat, they were participating less. They would come to the meetings and let the men do the talking. Within that period of 6 months, we're seeing the women coming up more. They did the elections, they decided that they wanted more representation. So that was important for them. They called us one day and they're like, we've pulled these resources and we want a portion meal. And then we are like, amazing. And so we go, we discuss, how do you want this portion meal? And we were able to get someone and they gave them matching funds. They got a portion meal that wasn't diesel powered, but one that was electric powered. I think you see it in the next slide. So they got the portion meal plus a pounding machine. And what happens when you go to a village, what you see at the corner there, Sarafu credit, is what participating businesses put in their business. So like for this portion meal, it's like a back of a last resort. The community members trade among each other, but they know if the other community member can't accept my Sarafu, that's what we call a community inclusion currency, I can easily go to the portion mill, I can grind my maize. In turn, the portion mill also releases the community currency for community initiatives. Because they dug, the government dug for them a dam, there was a lot of runoff of water, so there was heavy silting. But then using the community inclusion currency that are coming from the portion mill, they could be paid and they would take part in these activities. So it generated a lot of income, because before we had a lot of youth that were there. There was labor, what we call underutilized resources, but there wasn't money to pay them. But now this community is like, we'll pay you with the community inclusion currency, and the community is saying you can come to us and you can buy food for your family. So there was that also creation of employment. But because you're doing a voucher system, it has its own shortfall. If you have a really high youth population like the way Africa does, you'll notice that they are very savvy. They look at the voucher and they're like, we can manipulate, we can go produce a lot of it. So the question is, how do you have a fail-safe to make sure that people can't manipulate the voucher system? The second thing is about impact. We're getting a lot of questions like, how do you know that the community currency is being used where it's supposed to do? And so we thought about it, and since we're in a country where we're using M-Pesa, people are used to sending money via the phone, why not have a digital community currency? And we had it blockchain enabled because it's about the trust factor. You want to show people that you can't manipulate the transactions. If people are spending it on food, it will show on the blockchain that they're spending it on food. So on my next slide, it shows, as much as the slide shows that it's a smartphone, but most of the community's members can't access smartphones. So you'll see there that it just shows. So like we have, right now we have 11 different currencies. It's the previous one, the one with the font. As much as we have different kind of currencies, people can use it even on the really basic phones. We call them banner phones. Here we call them Mulikamuizi. So it's really basic. It's as easy as sending us an SMS. So people can go and then they can send their tokens. So they don't have to worry about carrying the money everywhere they go. So for us, that was like an upgrade. And so here it's, I think one of my colleagues is showing how to trade. You can choose which of your community currency you are in. The other good thing about us going digital was for them to be able to also trade with each other. Most community currencies work within a particular region, and so people are not trading with each other. But we had one case of Takangu Pesa, which is a coastal community trading with a rural community. The rural community in the uplands wanted fish, and the Takangu Pesa wanted feed for their animals. And so from the posho mill, they got the byproduct as feed for their animals, and then they were able to get fish back home. The other good thing about the community currencies, like the next slide was showing, is that one is that they are easy to move. Yes, what we call continuously liquid. They are stable, they are safe, they're also efficient, and they're affordable. We had in Kenya, the laws say that if you do a voucher system, it has to expire at the end of each year. And so every year you have to look for a donor to be able to produce vouchers. But with the digital token, we never have to worry about always printing new vouchers. We don't have to worry about people faking them and stealing away from the community. I talked about blockchain before, and so in my next slide, you see how we're able to see what they are spending on. So when they are sending their tokens, they can choose what they want to buy with. One way is that the participating businesses can have a directory. You can even sit on the blockchain. And it also creates opportunities for more of their goods and services to go. So for instance, if you want food, you can say that I want food. So like there you're seeing there's Miani Pesa, Congo Pesa, and you say what you're spending. And you can see that most of the people want food. It was also interesting to see that people also are choosing to give out for charity. And to see that social aspect, like somebody saying, okay, I'm meeting my needs. I feel like there's someone else that's not meeting. So like the part you're saying charity, we had a small school that didn't have chairs, and the community members were willing to contribute towards getting chairs for the community. Also, when you look at the part saying wallet IDs, the anonymity of it, we don't put any names on it. All we want, the data that we want is which community currency is trading, what are they trading on, and what is the volume of trade. Such data is good also in terms of showing it to like our county government officials. There's a month that we had a lot of water, because there wasn't water, and people are walking almost 30 kilometers to be able to get water. With that data, the community asked for it. They went to the county government and they said, this is a major concern for us. How can you help us? And they were able to get piped water. They had a cistern dug and a very huge reservoir. So it also shows what kind of data it can do, especially when you put it on the blockchain. And the county government has the surety that no one is messing up with it and putting water so that people can generate some income out of it. On the next slide, it shows how we can be able to see like spikes in trading. So you can see the graph there. This also helps in the countercyclical nature of it, because every one time you can look at the month and then you can ask yourself, where is there a spike of trading in the community currency this time of the month? Why is this community currency not being used? And when you go to the community, the data speaks to you. So like you can see that during this time, maybe the harvest was really low, even if they're having economic shocks like right now. We are having a huge locust invasion. We have been also having failure of rainfall. So it's good for them to, when they can't sell their produce, they have the community currency, and they can be able to use it. And so it shows up and down. Different colors for each of the community currency. The top one is our most active one. It's called Miani Pesa. It's in the rural areas. The next slide just shows how people interconnected it is. So when you look, you can see red, yellow on the next slide. You can see how so like the yellow is a different community currency, pink. You can see that they are trading with each other. We didn't have this before with the community vouchers, also because of distance, like people walking from one place to another, but now you can see. So every one day you can see how the people are trading on it. And it also, like we had Red Cross that are really interested in this kind of data, one in terms of disaster preparedness. You ask, you want to help this community that's had a disaster, let's say a flooding, but you want to know what are their needs or what were they need most of for their daily needs every day. You can access such kind of data because like before the disaster, maybe they were using maybe 50% of the community currency to buy flour. So you can know that it can inform your decision. Let's take flour to them, or let's support the local shop with enough flour, with enough beans based on what they're trading on. So on this slide, it shows you how, like on a good day, what they most spend on. You can see there's food, labor, retail, education. So that's also the beauty of us having the blockchain, because now we can access this data and we can see concerns. It helps us also in terms of looking to other service providers, looking for other partners. Like, can you get agricultural extension officer? What kind of food are they eating? Are they just doing monoculture? Are they eating a lot of maize? Are they mixing it up with vegetables? Whom can you bring in to help with that? Are they spending more on water? How can you help that? What kind of education? Do they need maybe value addition? So like because of this data, when we went to the community, they were asking us, right now we're having harvest and we're able to meet all our needs, but it would be good to be able to get someone to support us to do value addition and all that. On the next slide. I think what's important always is people want to know the impact on SDGs. Of course, there are the obvious ones like no poverty, zero hunger, and gender equality. In terms of hunger, mostly it's about meeting the basic needs, but also it's mostly about the savings. It's about the people, the ability to make sure somebody can save enough and invest into their businesses. In a rural community, most of that investment goes to farm inputs. So they're able to diversify, because before you take away that worry, they diversify. They look for more input in terms of assorted types of seeds. They're willing to go look for help so that they can grow their community. Then no poverty also in terms of pulling community resources together. Most of those chama have become self-lending mechanisms. So they are pulling their resources together and the community can come access loans from them, and hence the community grows. Gender equality, I think I talked about having almost 298, and 80% of them are women. We're having most of the women using the community inclusion currency because they're the ones most concerned about the daily needs of the family. So I was talking about humanitarian organizations in the next slide. I think even for UNDP, the next one, just continue click. Yes, yeah, thank you. There's always a gap. Like every time people are doing humanitarian assistance, they're like every time like there's disaster, you go, you put in almost. We had one scenario. Zimbabwe Red Cross was telling us they go into a refugee camp and they have all this assistance and they drive in with their cars and they give the cash. They usually do the cash transfer and you give this number of people the cash. The moment you drive out, you have these people coming from the big city. They come set camp and they sell their wares and people buy. And then within 2 weeks, there's no money and they have gone with the money. The beauty of the community currency is that people have to spend it within the community. So it encourages growth of local institutions rather than them taking out. So if you're having this gap here, can you fill it with the community inclusion currencies? And what can you put in to support the community inclusion currency? Rather than always giving in aid that eventually just moves out of the community and goes elsewhere. Essentially, we are saying that it can help thriving markets. It can help making sure that it doesn't trickle out as fast. So you can go, even if a disaster takes place, they have a fail-safe that keeps circulating. On my next slide, I'm trying to show you how the community inclusion currency CIC cycle works. Essentially, it's almost like when you go to a community, we start with the onboarding. The system can be different for different communities, and that's what's good about community inclusion currency. Every community is using a different. Essentially, most of the time we go, we do the onboarding process. Communities have to collectively agree. This is a social system. It's based on trust. If there is no trust, communities can't use it. And then they have to value the community goods and services. What is it that we are willing to trade? What is it that is coming from within the community? What is it that we are getting outside? And then you issue the e-vouchers. Because it's digital now and it's based on the blockchain, it doesn't require a lot of money to do it. So members can even issue themselves. So we're having communities that are starting on their own. Then we're having different donors that say, I want to support this community in this way. For instance, the donor that supported the posho mill, that was their way of ensuring that they support that community. And so they've invested in that community in a way that it will keep circulating. And then you can expand it in different ways. You can add smart contracts on the blockchain and all that. And then you can also track the CICs. When you track them, essentially it's to get the impact of the data, to inform you how to help the communities in case of disaster, to inform how government services can be brought into the community, and also making sure that it can grow with the community. Rather than having an up-bottom approach, the community can inform you from their trading patterns that these are our needs and this is how you can best support us. So I know a lot of people like to think of it as an economic tool, but for me, it's really social. It's about showing communities that the answers are not elsewhere. Look at what you already have. No community doesn't have goods and services. They say trade, business doesn't know war, business doesn't know if there's a disaster. Anytime something happens, like even if you go to a refugee camp, most of the time people look for ways that they can survive, whether they have money or not. They look for goods they're willing to offer each other. Youth are always looking for ways to volunteer, even when they don't have money. And so that ability to create employment, the ability to also to have people come together and share their thoughts, pull their resources together for the betterment of the community. I think that's what's important about the community inclusion currency. It's more important that we as organizations, when you're going to the community, rather than looking for ways to come with all the answers, here is a way for you to support the community so that they can meet you halfway. They'll come up with their own bottom-up approach, and you can come up with your bottom approach, and you can meet halfway. And you'll meet an empowered community that's willing to ask questions. They're willing to participate in decision making. And all that comes as a result of them just being able to meet their basic needs. And that's what's powerful. When you take out that worry, communities rally together and the community grows and it thrives. Thank you. And I look forward to your questions.
Caroline, thank you so much. Fascinating, and there are quite a few questions for you.
Okay.
So I'm just gonna go straight into it. Couple of colleagues,
Yes.
we Komi and Matthias are wondering what is the link made between the local currency shilling and the complementary currencies? Has the central bank been involved in this effort at all, and what has been the reaction of the central bank.
Okay. So, yeah, usually that's a huge concern for most people. But when you introduce a community currency, it's designed to strengthen the national economy. So it's providing a medium of exchange that can be used in the absence of sufficient national currency. For us, when we started, we thought it was a tool that would help. And yes, it's a good question about the central government. When you don't involve them on the onset, they tend to be worried about what's going on. But it's always important to remember that it's not legal tender. And unlike national currencies, local currencies cannot be put into a bank and saved. And so it encourages people to spend more. And because it provides a medium of exchange that is counter-cyclical to economic cycle, when the economy slows down, people's most of the time when the economy is going down, people tend to reduce their consumption and they try to save money. The more they save the money, the more they take it out of the hands of the people that really need it the most. So the CSC essentially is providing a mechanism for people to continue with the local economic activity. They can go on paying for their goods and services, even when the national currency is in short supply. So it's a complementary currency. It complements the national currency. And as different governments have different rules for it, you can read about the Swiss wheel, and there's the Buxton pound also. And it depends but it's good to involve them from the onset.
So another question is, how are the initial tokens structured? Who provides them? And how do we determine one token's value? This is from Yuko.
Okay. Thank you for the question. So when we started, what we did a baseline survey. And what we asked essentially is, every day when you want to meet your basic needs, what do you require? So like for us, we found out like people needed $2 to $4 a day to meet their basic needs. The other question that came was, what would people normally go into debt so that they can access their basic needs? And so you ask them that question, we found that most of the time people are going into debt for between the same amount, 200 to 400 shillings. And so hence we valued the token at 200 shillings when we started. Excuse me.
Interesting. And what in your presentation, Caroline, you showed a number of community currencies.
Yes.
What is the rationale, and is there organic growth of currencies, and does it make a difference if there is one or more community currencies? How does that happen?
Okay, so they are different because they're in different geographical locations. So they are not in the same place. Most community currencies usually started on the premise that they're for a different demarcated geographical area. And it's for people within that area to trade because it's based on trust. So most of the time it doesn't go out of the community. So we can find that most of the community currencies are even up to even 80 kilometers apart. And so they are from different places, hence they're different ones. So when we started, each community gave a different name for their community currency. But then because they're doing the paper voucher, they weren't able to trade with each other. But with the digital token, now they can interact. And also when we started the first currency, the second community had a peer training. They heard about the first community, they approached us, they're like, I think we also want that for us. And this first community went to the other community to train. And it was also really empowering for them because being able to go to another community and say, this works for us, is not the same as an organization going there and saying, here is a tool you can use. But then for them to hear their own peers say, we've tried this, we've tested it, and it's making changes in our life. So the different communities, different names, and different areas, yes.
Okay. There is another question from Ayad from Accelerator Lab in Libya.
Yes.
How do you convince the government to allow another currency to be used in the country? And the second question is around, what were the steps in implementation? I imagine that one of the things that you're trying to explore is, how would you run this in Libya? And if this is the case, I would take this conversation
offline between you and Caroline. Just as a heads up, we will have Caroline at Istanbul Innovation Days on Next Gen Economy in October, which will also be an opportunity to almost run a workshop and take people through the experience. If you were to do something like this in your own country, how would you go about doing that? So, Ayad, if this is what the second question was about, I would suggest that Caroline answers the first one. How do you convince the government to allow another currency to be used in the country? And then we can take the second one offline.
Okay. So for us, when we started, yes, we had issues with the